My name is Val Kenyon, and I am the Regional Dean of the Deanery of London, and this is a reflection for New Year's Day. As we look back on 2020, a year like none other, and hopefully a year that we will not be repeating anytime soon, let me begin this brief reflection today by wishing you all a most blessed, healthy, and prosperous 2021. In our liturgical year today, the 8th day of Christmas, is the naming of Jesus. And while the compilers of the Revised Common Lectionary have provided us with the account of that in the Gospel reading in Luke, there is also from the book of Numbers the blessing that we have heard many times over the years. A blessing filled with grace and light and hope and peace that feels just perfect for the beginning of a new year. Let me begin with the Gospel, and I will return to the reading from Numbers in just a moment. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. This is the gospel of Christ. We have all heard the quote from Shakespeare that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. It's from Romeo and Juliet. It in effect questions the role of our name, doesn't it? And I understand that this line is often used to point out that what a thing or a person is called does not necessarily contain the essence of that thing or person. And of course, there are instances without doubt where this is the case. However, I do think that the banner or the name that we put over something or someone or ourselves can have an impact. For closely connected to the topic of a name is the idea of identity. And if there is anything that's being asked of us as disciples of Jesus in this moment in history, it is, who are we as church? And what is it to be a disciple of Jesus in this hour? Now, this question becomes even more interesting, however, as we each in our own parishes consider just how to answer it in our unique circumstances. As central to being able to answer it lies both the guidance of God's Spirit, but also our willingness to connect to our particular contexts, those places in which God has asked us to minister, our neighborhoods, both our actual neighborhoods and neighborhoods of association, that is, groups with whom we feel a connection which may or may not be local to us. Now, in some ways, COVID has given us a crash course in doing things and seeing things differently. Yet, for most of us, adaptation and change can be challenging. As creatures of habit, we prefer to run in well-grooved tracks, aware there will be some bumps along the way, but confident that previously used solutions will still work for us. Yet in many cases, this is no longer true. And what is being asked of us instead, that is how we are being asked to see ourselves, identify ourselves, is more as perhaps explorers, reaching out into places we thought we knew, but we are finding we do not. Now again, for most of us, this can be unnerving, and that's understandable. Yet the good news is that as we venture out, Much is available to us as we go out in God's name and under God's blessing. And we are reminded of this in today's Old Testament reading from Numbers. Let me read that for you. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the Israelites. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the Israelites, and I will bless them." That's from Numbers 6, 22 to 27. Now, the idea of venturing out, buoyed up by the idea of God's presence and blessing going with us, that reminded me of a poem I read many years ago called The Gate of the Year. Written 30 years earlier, before King George VI would include this poem in his Christmas 1939 speech, The Gate of the Year seemed a perfect poem to include in our New Year's Day reflection of 2021. It was written by Minnie Louise Haskins, likely in 1908, who was then a student at the London School of Economics, at which she would later become a teacher. Now, this poem, known to us as The Gate of the Year, was originally titled by its author, God Knows. And it was included in a collection called The Desert. Now, anyone who has seen the film, The King's Speech, a 2010 British historical drama in which Colin Firth plays the future king, George VI, knows that all through his life, this much beloved king had to cope with a terrible speech impediment. Public speeches of any kind, especially before the support of Lionel Logue, his speech and language therapist, they were, to say the least, a serious challenge to this king. And yet so staunch was his commitment to his nation, especially when he found himself its unexpected monarch, that he would do what he must to lead and inspire his people. So in December of 1939, encouragement was needed now more than ever against the backdrop of a brutal war, with as yet so many unknowns laying before Britain. As King George sat at his microphone that Christmas Day, seeking to lift the spirits of his subjects, he did so as Britain itself, battered by the losses of warships and many other holdings, was coming to terms with a new reality. And amidst the many uncertainties that lay before the king, the nation, and indeed the whole world, King George would include a portion of this poem in his speech to offer comfort to those listening in these early days of World War II. And here is the part of the poem that he included. The Gate of the Year, God Knows. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light, that I may tread safely into the unknown." And he replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way." So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, trod gladly into the night. And he led me towards the hills and the breaking of day in the lone east. Now, while we live in very different times from King George and his subjects, we are nevertheless currently in a time of uncertainty as we collectively face the realities thrust upon us by COVID-19. Many of the events of this past year have asked us to honestly and openly consider who we are and what ministry looks like at this exact moment. While we move forward in hope, expectant of better things in the days ahead, there's much between us and that breaking of day in our situation. But what a comfort to be reminded that we are not alone in our struggle. not alone in our darkness, that we may not have all the answers, and yet there is available to us a far greater illuminating force that we might ever discover than on our own. And so, in the confidence of all of this, and with the reassurance that the one we serve and the one upon whom we cast all of our cares, all of our anxieties, this one loves and cares for us as we head into this new year. With this as our foundation, we place our hand into the hand of God to lead us forward. We place our hand into the hand of the one whose power working in us and through us and for us can do immeasurably more than we could ever ask, and far more than we could ever even imagine. We go out in the name of the one who came to be our light in the darkness, upon whose face we long to look, and in whom we know our peace rests, no matter the bumps along the way. Thanks be to God for all of this.